The grand arena of Corelli's station could hold 50,000 spectators, and today every seat was filled with beings who'd come to watch Kaida Vex do what she did best: destroy someone. The Kryn warrior stood at center stage, her 7-foot frame adorned in traditional combat wraps that left her muscular arms and legs free to move. Her skin was the deep bronze of Kryn anticipation, her long ears swept back in what her people called the hunter's position. She'd just finished the war dance, 3 minutes of acrobatic violence performed against holographic opponents that she tore through like paper. The crowd roared. They always did. Kaida had given them 73 straight victories over 7 years, each one a demonstration of Kryn's superiority. Her people were warriors by nature and culture, bred for combat, raised in arenas like this one. Every other species in the coalition had learned to respect Kryn's strength, usually the hard way. Then they announced her opponent, and Kaida almost laughed. Thomas Rivera, human combat instructor, walked onto the arena floor like he was heading to a boring meeting. He was maybe 6 feet tall, lean rather than bulky, wearing simple training clothes instead of ceremonial armor. His hands were in his pockets. His expression was polite and utterly unimpressed. He looked like someone's accountant had wandered into the wrong venue. The pre-match ceremony required both fighters to face each other while their credentials were announced. Kaida's list took 3 minutes: championships, ranked victories, species defeated, techniques mastered. Thomas's introduction mentioned that he taught self-defense classes at the Human Embassy and had a background in something called mixed martial arts, which sounded adorable. Kaida stepped forward, her skin darkening to combat black, and addressed Thomas loud enough for the cameras to catch every word. "I've broken warriors twice your size. I've defeated opponents from species that make humans look like children playing at war." She circled him slowly. "You stand there like you're waiting for transportation. Do you even understand what's about to happen to you?" Thomas watched her circle with mild interest, like he was observing weather patterns. When she finished, he simply said, "Are you done?" The crowd laughed. They thought he was being brave or foolish. Kaida's ears flattened completely against her skull, pure Kryn rage. This human didn't even have the sense to be afraid. He wasn't posturing or trying to intimidate her back. He was just waiting, like she was an inconvenience keeping him from more important things. "I'm going to enjoy this," Kaida growled. "I'm sure you will," Thomas replied, and went back to waiting with that infuriating calm. The referee signaled. The crowd screamed, and Kaida decided she was going to make this human regret his species' entire existence. Kaida exploded forward with the kind of opening assault that had ended 17 of her fights in under 30 seconds. Her fist carved through the air where Thomas's head had been, meeting only empty space. She spun into a leg sweep that would have shattered bone. He wasn't there. A rising knee strike that should have connected with his ribs found nothing. Thomas moved like smoke, like water, never quite where her attacks landed, his footwork economical and precise. The crowd's roar shifted pitch. This wasn't the immediate domination they'd expected. Kaida increased her speed, her skin now completely black with adrenaline, her strikes powerful enough to crack the reinforced arena floor when they missed. She was faster than most species, stronger than almost all of them, and she'd been training in combat since she could walk. But she couldn't hit him. Thomas's expression remained calm, almost meditative. He wasn't even breathing hard. His hands stayed low and relaxed, his stance fluid. He circled and evaded, creating angles that made Kaida overextend, forcing her to reset her position again and again. And he still hadn't thrown a single strike. "Fight back!" Kaida snarled, frustration bleeding into her voice. "I am," Thomas said quietly, stepping around another combination. Kaida's trainer was shouting something from her corner, but she couldn't hear it over the blood pounding in her ears. She cornered Thomas against the arena barrier and unleashed her finishing sequence, the same combination that had won her the championship 3 years running. 12 strikes in 4 seconds, each one capable of ending the match. Thomas didn't try to block or dodge. He redirected. His hands made minimal contact with her wrists and elbows, just enough to guide her momentum past him, to send her strength flowing in directions she hadn't intended. The final strike, her most powerful, carried her completely past Thomas and into the barrier. Her own force rattled her bones. She stumbled. Actually stumbled. Kaida Vex, undefeated champion, 7 years without a loss, stumbled from her own momentum while her opponent stood untouched 3 feet away. The arena went silent in shock. Thomas stood there, breathing steadily, his hands back in that relaxed low guard, waiting. Just waiting. His eyes held no mockery, no triumph, just patient attention, like he was studying a problem he already knew how to solve. And for the first time in 7 years, Kaida felt something she'd forgotten existed. Doubt. Pride overrode strategy. Kaida roared and abandoned everything her trainers had taught her about control and technique, attacking with pure, overwhelming fury. She was stronger than any human, faster than most species, trained since childhood in an art that was equal parts combat and sacred ritual. But Thomas wasn't fighting like anything she'd studied. He wasn't trying to win through strength or speed or technique. He was making her defeat herself. Every missed strike exhausted her a little more. Every burst of power drained her reserves. Her skin stayed combat black, but sweat was starting to darken her wraps. Thomas remained infuriatingly efficient, never using more movement than necessary, his breathing still controlled, his expression still calm. When Kaida finally connected with what should have been a devastating body shot, Thomas didn't try to tank it. He rolled with the impact, absorbing and dispersing force in ways that defied her understanding of physics. The crowd had stopped chanting her name. They were watching Thomas with growing fascination, recognizing what Kaida refused to see. He'd been in control since the opening bell. He was choosing how this fight progressed, choosing when to evade and when to redirect, choosing to teach rather than destroy. Kaida, strategy? Her trainer screamed from the corner, practically begging her to reset, to think, to stop fighting like a berserker and start fighting like a champion. But Kaida couldn't hear strategy over the roaring humiliation of being toyed with by someone she'd publicly mocked. She'd called him weak. She'd laughed at his species. She'd promised to make an example of him, and he was dismantling her with nothing but patience and precision. She charged one final time, putting everything into an overwhelming assault that would either end this or end her. Thomas waited, perfectly still, until she was committed beyond the point of no return. Then he moved, not away, but in. Suddenly he was inside her guard, too close for her long arms to be effective, and he did something absurdly simple. He swept her legs while she was completely overextended. Kaida hit the ground hard enough that the impact echoed through the arena. The crowd exploded with shocked noise, cheers and gasps, and disbelieving laughter. Above her, Thomas stood calmly, hand already extended to help her up. The referee was counting. Kaida stared at the lights, her skin fading from black to ashen gray, the color of cringe shame, and realized she'd just learned what losing felt like. The medical bay was quiet except for the distant roar of the crowd watching replays. Kaida sat on an exam table while medics scanned for injuries that didn't exist, just bruised pride and shattered assumptions. Her skin had settled into pale gray, her ears flat against her head. She'd refused all interviews, refused to see her team, refused to do anything but sit in silence with her defeat. When Thomas walked in, still in his training clothes, still looking utterly unruffled, something in Kaida's chest tightened. She expected mockery. Expected him to throw her own words back at her, to make her feel as small as she'd tried to make him feel. Instead, he pulled up a chair and asked, "Want to know why you lost?" Every fiber of her pride screamed to say no, to dismiss him, to storm out and pretend this had never happened. But Kaida had spent 7 years crushing opponents without learning anything, and for the first time, she was curious. "Tell me." Kryn combat philosophy is built on overwhelming force and dominance displays, Thomas said, his tone respectful, almost professorial. It's beautiful and powerful and incredibly effective against most opponents. It's also predictable. Kaida's ears twitched irritably. Human martial arts evolved differently, Thomas continued. We developed hundreds of fighting styles across different cultures, all trying to answer the same question. How does someone smaller and weaker survive against something stronger? He smiled slightly. The answer is strategy, adaptation, using an opponent's strength against them. You're the most physically gifted fighter I've ever faced, Kaida, but you relied on gifts instead of growth. The words hit harder than any strike in the arena. Kaida thought about her 73 victories, each one reinforcing her belief that strength and aggression were enough. She'd stopped learning the moment she started winning. Every opponent you crushed made you more confident, Thomas said gently. But confidence without adaptation becomes arrogance, and arrogance creates patterns. You broadcast your intentions with your skin color, your ear position, your stance. You're so used to overpowering resistance that you never develop subtlety. Kaida's skin darkens slightly, not combat black, but the deep blue of Kryn contemplation. You're saying I'm predictable. I'm saying you were predictable. You don't have to be. Thomas stood, offering his hand again. If you want to learn. She stared at his hand. This human who just humiliated her in front of 50,000 spectators and was now offering to teach her. Pride said refuse, wisdom hard-earned and freshly minted one. She took his hand. Why would you help me after what I said? Because humiliation is temporary, Thomas said simply. But knowledge shared between species builds something that lasts. Besides, you're too talented to waste fighting the same way for the next 7 years. Over the following months, their training sessions became the stuff of arena legend. Kaida learned to blend Kryn power with human adaptability, to read opponents instead of just hitting them, to find stillness in chaos and strategy in simplicity. She won her next